Camera on? Question mark. Mic on. One. You guys are on as well. So just double checking that. Seems like it's all good.
Test,
Hello
test.
and
1, 2,
welcome.
3.
Yeah, it's working nice and easy. I can see the bars moving. Hello and welcome everybody. It's been a while since we've done one of these as well. As always, we are back with another 2.5 talent. We're going to be talking about a bunch of things. As you can see in the title, IEM Rio, Elisa, Thunderpick, NAVI era, is Blade the go, etc, etc. But before we get into all of that, as we always do, fellas, what have we been up to? Who wants to kickstart us? What have we been up to the last month and a half?
Annie, go ahead.
I'll probably start it because you guys have been a lot more frequenting the CS spaces I have. I've obviously moved cities for grad school, so I've been taking care of all of that. I've been doing a lot of Thunderpick, doing a lot of CCT. Challenger season's finally over as well, or at least regular season's over. So, taking care of business there with North America and South America. But yeah, it's been really busy across all parts of my life right now. And we're kind of getting into the busiest time, I'd say, with these next
Probably.
few weeks for all three of us. And once those 3 weeks are over, then everything kind of comes grinding to a halt pretty much till like January.
Maybe even later, right? Because I feel like this year,
maybe even later.
January was kind of nothing bar HTV Awards. So maybe
Exactly,
February,
yeah.
what
So
the fuck are we
it's
gonna
gonna
do?
be a long few months after those couple of weeks, but
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to those couple of weeks for sure.
Trav, what have you been up to?
Yeah, I mean, kind of same here. I took the opportunity to, before I kind of had a little run of broadcasts in a row. I went to one of my old childhood parks I used to go to all the time. Had a nice relaxing day. It was really sunny, really warm. Probably one of the last warmest day of the year, I would say. Chose a good day to do it. Had a nice smoothie. Rode my bike. It was fun, and then got straight back into the grind again. As sort of Annie said. I had some Compass games, I had CCT, I had Challenger Cato qualifiers, and I did the North American qualifiers as well.
Did that
So I
too,
had
yeah.
2 days in a row that ended at 5 a.m. because I'm a moron. But there we are. It's all
Hey, they were
fun
good
and
games.
dandy. Yeah, and some of them were pretty wild. But yeah, and then of course running into pre-Rio stuff. I had another like 5 or 6 days in a row, some CCT work, some of the playoff games for some of the different series, and yeah, and then jumping into Rio, it was incredibly enjoyable. Obviously, working it from home, but doesn't mean it's any less enjoyable. Obviously, would love to travel one day. That's the goal. That's what we're doing it for. But
Sure.
gotta say, of course, it's always fun to put me and Neo's voices, of course,
Yeah.
to the games in Rio, because there was some high quality stuff we got to cover, and I'm very grateful for that.
I want to say as well, we might not have done a podcast since Challenger when we were together. I have a feeling that
Did one, no?
yeah, no,
Did
but
one?
like Challenger, whatever it was. Oh, maybe we did do
After?
one.
After Young Shipping, we definitely did one after Young
Did we
Shipping.
one?
I'm pretty
Okay,
sure.
fair enough. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how long it's been. They kind of all blend into one. But yeah. I guess my side, there was another challenger in. I did Challenger Atlanta, pretty good fun. Honestly, it was really weird. It felt like probably one of the easiest tournaments I've worked, just because like for me the schedule was quite easy. Like day one, it was just 4 best of ones, and all of my games was stomps, like 13-2, 13-3. I think the biggest, like the closest game we got on day one was a 13-4. So it was not like very, very quick games done in like under 30 minutes each map. So very easy. Honestly, spent more time in the breaks than me casting on day one, which was kind of weird. And then day two just had the 1 best of 3, and again it was like a 2-0. Rooster just got absolutely stomped, and those maps again weren't close. I think the best they got was like a 13-8, and even that was like a real cosmetic sort of 13-8. They got sort of battered. And then day three, I had 2 good semi-finals, which was decent. But yeah, it did feel like one of the easiest tournaments, especially considering I was on all the early shifts, so I'd be done at like 9 to 10 p.m. Whereas some of the other guys, or so Yumi and Tea Time, for example, on the other shift, they were going until like sometimes like 3 a.m. or whatever. So I really felt quite lucky with that event. It was pretty easy. But then did have to fly straight back. I had to be at the airport at 5 a.m. Land at 9 a.m. Do sound check and mic check and camera, whatever, ready for IEM Rio literally straight after that. So that was a little bit cooked, in all fairness, but thankfully had a nap in between. It was good. IEM Rio was fun. Like Travis said, we had some pretty good games there, so really can't complain at all about that. It was a very, very fun event. Like I said, one day hopefully we get to go out there in person, because Rio, at least from the drone shots and shit that they do in like the breaks, looks pretty stunning. And like, I have to go and see
culture.
What's it called? Christ the Redeemer, right? That's what's called.
Yes.
The big statue. I have to go
Yeah.
see that at some point. But yeah,
James.
exactly. James got one of his two main traditions, and one of them is the obviously the Christ the Redeemer. He's keeping that one up. The other one we don't need to talk too much about. So yeah, it's no, it is definitely a cool event. It's always fun to be part of IEMs. They're obviously quite big in that sense, but it's a good way of us guys who are coming through the tier 2 to get kind of slightly integrated in the tier 1 scene and work in those big games. So yeah, always good fun. I guess if you want, we can go straight into talking about IEM Rio itself in a little bit more of a kind of a breakdown in a sense. So of course, for those who missed it, the best of 5 was pretty good between Navi and Mouse. I want to say sort of expected winners here. You know, for Mouse, I mean, even me and Trav, we casted them in like the early stages or the groups, I guess, and we were kind of saying for Mouse, it's about trying to reclaim where they once were, right? They're not that team that at the start of the year were like always going like super deep into all tournaments. They've had a couple of runs where things weren't looking good, like Pro League, for example. So it's good to see them back in towards that conversation for a trophy, but I think it was pretty expected to see Navi kind of book that first place, right? And credit to them. And, you know, I think they played really good Counter-Strike basically all the way throughout and continue to, I think, more or less cement themselves in most places as a kind of like the team of the year, Alexi IGL of the year, Blade coach of the year as well. Like, I don't really think when we get towards those HSTV awards in January, I feel like there's not too much debate anymore, right? Even if, for example, like Spirit were to win the major again, I still feel like Chopper doesn't come in towards that IGL of the year conversation or whatnot. So I don't know about you guys, but for me, like with this now win and how the whole year for Navi's been, I feel like there shouldn't really be too much of a debate of who's team of the year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the year's pretty much done and dusted in that sense. When I mean, you look at the cabinet and even the tournaments where they didn't lift the trophy, they've gone deep. They've pretty much only lost to the champions in pretty much every situation, barring Dallas and Pro League 19, which were anomalies in a lot of senses. Pro League 19, it was a loss to FaZe, who were number 1 at the time, and then Dallas was a blip in the radar, which for a lot of teams, Dallas is usually the blip in the radar, so I'm not really holding that too much against them. But yeah, for the most part, it's been just awesome to watch them kind of evolve as a team as time goes on, because initially it was like this cookie cutter Alexi B style that just works, and the structures is the reason why they're winning, and then it got to a point where their confidence was flourishing post Copenhagen, and then you start to see, like, you know, stars kind of flourish, like Bit become a superstar, Imed, JL, they all have these incredible peaks, that you're thinking, wow, this is a team now that has some of the best players in the world, bar none. And now we get to this point in Rio where it's a completely different Navi, where it's a Navi that's running on fumes. It's a Navi that we're kind of throwing the structure out the window in some rounds. We're losing some of that kind of firepower that you have, and we're just making it man disadvantage, clutch after clutch after clutch, just crazy retakes, crazy post plants, and almost every single time when their backs are against the wall, they find a way to dig themselves out of it. And I mean, I think almost every series they had to come back from like just a crazy situation. Against Heroic, it was that Dust 2 where they had to grind back on T side. Against Mouse, honestly, there was a real world where they could have gotten reverse swept if Mouse closed out that Ancient. And in all those situations, there was somebody down the line that showed up and gave them a little bit of juice to get them over the line. So seeing that evolution over these last few tournaments has been really impressive to see. Now, I don't know necessarily if they're going to be winning the major per se with how much steam that they're burning to get to that point, but I'll be very curious to see if they can do that. And I think that'll be obviously the talk of the town when we get there.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's what makes it all the more impressive as well. Because if you remember, obviously FaZe had their streak at the beginning of CS2. They made, I think, what it was 5 finals in a row. But that included obviously Thunderpick, if you want to include that one, which is online. That included CS Asia Championships, which wasn't exactly the most stacked event in the world. You know, like, I'm not going to take anything away from FaZe's run because it was very good. But I think with how Navi's run is now in the position of the calendar with so many more high quality events with so much more high quality opposition. especially if they cement it with the World Final and in a major, so they make the finals of both of those, maybe win one of them. Like, it's not only doubly as impressive as FaZe's final streak, especially as it's very well publicized how Rops said he felt burnt out after FaZe's streak, right?
Yeah.
He was kind of saying how the team was running on fumes. And now Alexi and JL and many of the other team players on Navi are talking about, as Annie said, the running on fumes statement, which is very, very real. And they're still delivering and they're still finding a way. And they have got some of that like old FaZe quality with their backs against the wall that they find a way. That's what true champions do in any sport. When your back's up against the wall and you're feeling the most tired you felt, to still find a way to win. And that is why, for me, I think this is as close as we've had to an era in a really long time.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, especially because people were talking about it for a while, right? Saying how there's no number one team, and that kind of makes Counter-Strike boring. I was always the other way. Like, I think a lot of people, obviously, people were so used to having that Astralis team for like 4 years or whatever, basically just be kind of that dominant force, always number one, and they were kind of always wanting somebody to beat at tournaments. I think Navi's got to be the closest we've had in terms of a team that are going into basically every tournament as the favorite. I mean, especially over the last couple of years. I know, like, you kind of touched on FaZe start of CS2, but even some of them, they always came with that caveat of, right, it's a new game. People still aren't really kind of used to it. I mean, we even kind of went into, like, IEM Sydney, for example, first CS2 tournament, and people were saying, like, we haven't even pracked CS2, basically, because we still got CSGO officials, because that previous Blast tournament was still in Go, right, when CS2 had, like, officially come out. So it was, like, a little bit weird in that sense. So there was always these sort of caveats in that sense, but yeah, for me, the way things are looking, I think Navi are the closest team we've had to, like, really cementing themselves in that era, which is good. I guess just before we kind of go a little bit more in depth into Navi and the era, just kind of finishing up on Rio itself, probably I want to touch on the other side, people who didn't perform, didn't show up, right? I think there's a couple that really stand out to me in particular, or a few that, people spoke about FaZe, but I don't really like look at FaZe that much in this time. But the main ones that I think I wanted to do better, first one is actually just Pain, right? On home soil. I love this Pain side. I really want Biggest Area to be able to kind of do something on his home soil in front of hopefully get towards a crowd, but he didn't even get that far, right? So I was quite upset with that. G2, that's the biggest one, right? Going from winning a trophy to having Nico's worst performance of all time on LAN. Snacks, basically a fucking wooden plank in the server, doing absolutely fuck all, both calling wise and shooting wise. Hunter looking ass as well. I mean, like, generally this team was woeful. So G2 is a classic. And then Astralis too. I mean, everyone, they're quite funny to hate on, right? Fair enough. With what's going on, but like, they're actually just not even remotely playing well. Like, it doesn't even look functional. This team looks like an absolute mess. Like, Cadians come in and we even joked about it in our, little group chat when we saw them drop out. But, fellas, maybe we were all looking at this wrong. Maybe Tessus and Shush are the real goats. Fuck us down and a Yabi. Maybe those two, because they've gone into a new system and are still playing well and are still doing better, right? Obviously, they beat Astralis recently, and where the social media had a whale of a time. So, yeah, they did better in this tournament. They're doing better in every tournament so far. And even with that core of Cadian, Down, and Yabi, it's making absolutely no difference. This team still looks dreadful. So, maybe we were picturing it all wrong in this sense. But yeah, Astralis, G2, and Pain are the three main ones for me. There's maybe an argument to make about complexity as well, but I actually think they're in a lot more trouble than just like this tournament. I think that team is like rapidly falling out of contention. Like, they don't actually again look competitive in the tier 1. I think they're dropping into like a tier 1.5 team now. They're like joining the likes of like Big and teams, I guess, of that. I mean, like Ents maybe as well. Maybe not as bad as Ents, but like, kind of in that. I would say Big is like probably a decent example of another 1.5-ish team. So yeah, I don't know. For me, they're the I guess the 4 main teams in total who I wanted to do better and just didn't.
Yeah, the complexity one's interesting because I feel like that team plays like a dead team in a lot of ways.
It feels like they know changes are coming, right? That's how it looks to me.
Yeah, I mean, when you're regularly picking into Vertigo as your map pick, that to me screams that you have no idea what the hell's going on, and you're clinging at straws, and to me that is the sign that one of these players of Floppy or Grimmer is gonna have to go. they've got a lot of options in this situation where they could go NA. They could pick up an EU player because they have that option since JT is South African.
Mhm.
So it'll be a very interesting time post Shanghai how they want to play the market. But I think this team and this organization has a lot of pulling power. I think Jason Lake has really established himself as that owner that a lot of these players can trust,
Yeah.
and the fact that this team stayed together post what the phase acquisition with the Game Square stuff is really impressive, and I think that should be a good sign for them. So I'm not like worried about them yet. I think they should make the major, and for them that's probably enough, at least from the org's perspective. And then post that, I think that's where you just start to make some hard decisions.
What
You
is the
saw
hard
us once,
decision
Blair.
though, right? This is, I think, the
Uh,
big conversation. Like, where do you go? Because
yeah,
you mentioned JT. The other one that people have been mentioning is Floppy, right? Which way do you lean in this? I mean, as our resident North American, where do you actually lean here? Is it because the only thing with the JT argument, which is I made said to
well,
someone
sorry,
else.
I think JT's fine. I was
Okay,
thinking
cool.
it was either Grim or Floppy.
Yeah.
Were my two.
Because I saw people calling
I
for JT, and if JT goes, do you think TC probably goes with him? I feel like they're like a bit of a
yeah,
pair, right?
yeah,
So
definitely.
I don't
Yeah,
think they want to lose the IGL and the coach unless they're going for a complete overhaul, and then that's a different
for sure.
vibe, right?
Yeah, I think keeping I mean JT is just a fantastic IGL. Like there's
Agreed.
no doubt in my mind that the reason why they're remotely relevant right now is because he's able to call mid rounds very well. His set pieces are still the key point about how he plays and calls as an IGL, which is fantastic to have. And I don't think Complexity should ever let go of him. TC is kind of like I don't know how much he provides. I can definitely tell that there's a really good synergy with JT that I wouldn't also pull the plug there either. That's where I'm looking towards Grim, who's supposed to be the second star of this team,
Mm-hmm.
or Floppy, who's the anchor of the team. And honestly, I can see the cases for both, but for me personally, I think that Grim's floor is just not good enough. It's really worrying to me that he has maybe a couple of maps within a season that show to me what he can do,
Yeah.
and it's just not consistent enough if they want to be a consistent top 10 team. So for me, I would look towards there's so many different options that you have within North America for a second star as far as the youngsters go. Now, if you try to go down the Floppy route, it's like if you want to stay NA, you have very few options. You have
Wreck, I guess.
Rec
But
as an
I
option.
don't think M80, as we saw on Twitter, I don't think he wants to sell. I think he's saying like we should be competing
I
with
don't
them,
blame them.
and this is
They,
a prime opportunity where they can actually probably be the number 2 team behind Liquid, right? If we're being
yeah,
honest.
no, for sure. It's a smart decision from them to not give it up. And if you look beyond M80, you are taking some significant risks. And I mean, you're not going to poach Sus. That's not happening.
No.
From Wildcard.
Do you
And
think they have to go
then
EU? Do you reckon?
yeah, I mean that's basically their only choice. But then again, it becomes this whole song and dance of, can you get an EU guy out here? Is it possible to convince them? I mean, the whole ring around the rosy that they had for the EU lineup was so draining for Jason like that.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they have the capabilities of doing that or if they want to do that since their identity is so ingrained within NA.
America,
So
yeah.
uh, I don't know. It's a very tough ask to go for Floppy because I think the decisions if you want to stay NA it's a lateral move at best if you can even get those moves. So for me, I would remove Grim and I would try to pick up somebody. You could pick up
JBA?
JBA. That's an
Yeah.
option. And I've heard conversations that like he's not land proven and whatnot, but he's only played 3 lands. The kid's
He's
19. Like
19, yeah, exactly.
you got to give him some time to develop. I think there's just so many more options for a second star on this team that can be molded by an experienced IGL like JT, an experienced coach in TC, and of course Elige. Like just Elige being on this team is such a big drawing point for any new player because this guy is so willing to develop a team and create culture within a team that I think that his importance is going to be paramount. So yeah, I think they would be in a better spot if they drop Grim.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right, about consistency, because we saw, I think it was the Complexity Imperial game, and obviously we know Imperial isn't necessarily a great gauge because they were a last-minute stand-in. But Complexity only just really got past them, and then Grim had that Anubis map on CT, so we went 17-4 on CT.
Mm-hmm.
And like, where's the consistency in the games that matter after that? Of course, you can say if you want to be really kind, they did push the finalists in Mals to overtime in both maps, but if you look at the scoreboards, really, it didn't feel like Mouse were kind of in control for pretty much the entire game. It felt like so. Yeah, I think I agree that Grim is probably the guy you look at because in the big games he doesn't necessarily pop up, and if he does, it's one map. And with the, we're wasting Elise's prime in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
people might argue that his prime was a few years ago,
Maybe
but he's still
slight
putting up exactly the
post-prime,
same. Yeah, but it's like post prime, and it's still that is still a very very high level. And of course, Hulzerk is actually very consistent now. So you've got two amazing pieces which are doing decent work, and yeah, I think that'll be changed. And of course, if as well, I think a good point to mention, if you compare complexity to the others, before the event, you probably pick complexity over the likes of a Heroic, over the likes of a Furia, because Furia showed nothing. Heroic had to come through the closed qualifiers, and sure, it was a good run through the closed qualifiers, through that lower bracket gauntlet they had to make, but you'd expect a team like Complexity to make the playoffs over like a Furia or a Heroic, and I really do think that Heroic now, for me, of all the teams that sort of made more of an unlikely run, Heroic for me are the most impressive, especially with how they pushed Navi. Like Heroic, Heroic almost the point where those lesser teams, those tier 1.5 teams, want to look at and say, okay, we can make those runs now. Look at Heroic.
It's true. I mean, I got to give a lot of credit to this team. Every time it seems like they're dead, they keep finding a way to stay in the conversation. Like, I don't think they're even at a point yet where they've kind of dipped in towards the 1.5, the way like Big and Complexity are, just because of how they keep staying in and around that top scene somehow, right? I think maybe a lot of credit has to go towards Kicktown. I do think he actually does a lot for this team, calling wise, and he keeps digging them out of bad situations, time and time again. So yeah, fair play to them. I think they were like probably the biggest overachiever. Maybe also Furia as well. I think Furia can be considered a bit of an overachiever on home soil.
How they got destroyed by Mouse, yeah.
Yeah. Credit to them, right? Like, if coming in towards this event, it was like, if I had to pick like a Brazilian team, I would have actually potentially leaned Pain, right? Like in terms of like who do I see is going to be the most likely to make it to like the playoffs or play in front of a crowd.
Fury would have been the last team I picked, Neil. Genuinely.
Yeah. Honestly, just because they again, we're talking about the dead team. It's not the buff. Like this Fury is always going to look like a dead team, but they actually did again play real. Case Rata looked incredible in the groups. Top rated player in the groups, like a 1.56, I think it was. So like, yeah, nuts performances from him. So yeah, I mean, credit to Fury. I think both them and Heroic overachieved. Vitality maybe slightly underachieved as well. I would say VP maybe slightly overachieved, because for VP they've looked very much out of, like, even though they're a good team, they've just kind of just again felt sort of dead. It feels like changes are coming. Even James mentioned it, saying like, everyone's position is at risk, especially mine, right? It was like his quote, something like that. So I think he knows that probably if the major doesn't go too well, or the tail end of the year doesn't go too well, there might be kind of changes on the cards, and it might include James. So we'll have to see. But I think unless you got anything to touch on more, that probably wraps up IEM Rio. We can go a little bit more detail into NAVI.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to say. You kind of touched on it very briefly, but I just want to give a huge amount of props to Mouse for the bounce back after the blip at Pro League, because that was a really good run. If they beat NAVI, that would have been the true coming of age, and especially there was a chance there was a little glimmer of hope at one point. I definitely think they are putting that arena struggle somewhat behind them, because the way they dispatched Furia, who were the home favorites, obviously, that you got to give them some credit for that. So fair play, and a Mouse that can contend with the likes of Navi and Vitality. Vitality have dropped off a little bit. That's a good thing for the scene, because we need more teams to challenge those top three.
Especially considering as well, Vitality won't have Mezzi, they have Jax at Blast, so that might be another opportunity to see kind of where maybe Vitality are not really in contention, so maybe other teams can make a bit of a run.
Yeah, I think the Furious series as well, it was a 13-3, 13-3, but when it started, there was like a couple of good rounds that Fallen called. It was like these upper pops on Nuke that it really riled up the crowd, because it's these really fast-paced rounds. They start to get these kills, and I'm thinking once that upper pop worked once, I was like, this series could potentially just be over if Mouse cannot bounce back from this. Like, momentum-wise, it's gonna run away from them, but the fact that they kept their composure to reorient themselves, and they did this, I think, on Mirage as well at one point. So the fact that they were able to do that multiple times shows to me that they've really gone through that trial by fire pretty well. And again, a win against Vitality in an arena is no easy feat. That team is well oiled when it comes to how to play in a playoff situation. And I mean, again, this score line for the final is it's very deceptive because that ancient game they were in pole position for pretty much the entire time, but
Map
unfortunately for
1 was
them,
close
Navi,
too.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and unfortunately, just Navi's inevitable, right?
Low
And
key choke.
sometimes
Yeah.
you can't lose. This team can't lose at some point. So it is what it is. But I think for them, this is just a great confidence booster for that Shanghai bout. Can they
Yeah.
make it through the bracket, that gauntlet that's before them? It's possible. It's definitely possible. And you can't say anything but like they are definitely potential dark horses for that event. But I'm really excited to see if they can do it because who knows with how the transfer market's looking, with certain teams going kaboom, this team might also be dead in the water soon because just they might get poached. A lot of these players might get poached. So
Hmm.
who knows? You know.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Should we go into a little bit more on to with Navi, just like the definition of era? And another question that you were sort of proposing here, Trav, is kind of the GOAT coach conversation as well, right? I think that's definitely something we could touch on. I've got the events up here of what will fit on the screen, starting at Rio, goes all the way down to Blast Premier Spring Groups 2024. And it is a sea of gold and silver, right? I think it's probably the main thing. Rio first, full final second, Pro League first, Cologne second. You know, you move all the way down. EWC first, Spring final second, all the way down, and of course the major, etc. So this is a side that I think without a doubt claimed. You know, we kind of touched on it. Claimed that title of being the team of the year when it gets towards it. Alexi the IGL of the year. Blade the coach of the year. There's no doubts, right? That is an absolute guarantee. And maybe like, you know, so Wonderful won't get Orper of the year. That's fair enough. I'm pretty sure that was good to Zaiwu. Nice and simple. I don't, even with the MVP, I don't really know if I don't think Imba really enters into any of the sort of the conversations here. And
Mostly JL,
yeah,
I think.
and JL's probably the other one. I'm just thinking like, who will JL contend with for that?
You see, the thing is, I don't think they're going to be any of the years because there's some individuals which have just been better. Like, I still think you can't call JL Rifler of the Year.
No.
Like, Donk's peaks have been higher, but JL's impact, pure impact in big moments and just achievements
Yeah.
are obviously better than Spirit. And you know, I think there's a genuine conversation that if JL has a good performance at the major and Navi win the major, it's not just an absolute, you know, dead cert Navi era. Like, it's just, I think it's an absolute, I think it's even pretty much a Navi era right now already,
Yeah.
but it's guaranteed to be called that by everyone if they win the major. But if JL does well and they win the major, or even come second at the major, I think JL could be borderline third best player of the year because Munazi just doesn't have as many achievements as JL would. Donk has fallen off, and we don't know where Spirit are going to be at the end of the year, right? So, like, his rating is like going on a solid diagonal downwards.
Yeah.
So, there's a genuine conversation, I think, for third. Fourth for me is pretty much would be nailed on if they do really well at the major. I think he would even be, I'd even rank him higher than Nico because I just can't overlook a Rio that was, sure, it's no recency bias, but the Rio as bad as that for Nico, you just haven't seen anything like that from, sure, it's 3 maps, but you haven't seen anything like that from, you know, JL. So for me, I think this is why like, all these pieces have come together amazingly. And again, like you mentioned Blade, Neo, while we're going to try and get into the conversation about Blade, like, I tweeted in 2023 when the roster came together. I think on the day the roster came together, I think it was June 2023. I said I liked Alexi, I liked Emma, I liked JL, but all on Navi at once. Like you know, I agreed that it could work, but it just didn't feel like Navi. Like after how many years they never went international, they always stuck with a Ukraine/Russian project, and obviously, you know, world situation has contributed to that difference, of course, unfortunately. But that's one of the main reasons why we questioned the change. Like, would they be able to deliver? Would they be able to win events with a change in an international team? It made me feel like, you know, excited, but almost sad at the same time. I thought it was Alexi's final opportunities because he's failed at so many others previous. But everything is fit together. And I think a lot of that credit does have to go to Blade. And I think it was Pimp on the desk who said, is Blade the GOAT coach? And I think, you know, Yanko immediately shut him down and said, no, bro, Zonic? Like, hello? Like, he's won so much more. But look what Zonic has done elsewhere. He's kind of done not much at all. He's really like not done much at all. And Blade has brought up this entire new roster from seemingly like when it didn't look like it was going to fit together whatsoever. And he's done this with 2 different IGLs as well. And I think that is just such a great start to his CV, where I think he's actually almost like how people call Carrigan the GOAT IGL over Glaive now. Like that system just worked so well and was just kept innovating above and beyond their sort of ceiling. I think Blade for me might be better at this point. I do actually agree with Pimp.
So for me, Blade's been the GOAT coach since the Copenhagen win. Genuinely,
Okay.
I haven't made that public because I didn't want to get slandered on Twitter. But to me, the reasons as to why, I think I touched on this on Rescope when the conversation was brought up, but because I think working with superstars like Simple and Electronic is an incredibly difficult task that you can see in so many different teams. There's so many IGLs, so many coaches that cannot deal with these kind of egos. It's very difficult to do, and yet still Blade was able to find ways to win with those players, with a quote unquote underdeveloped IGL and Boomich. Also, I mean, there was a ton of question marks about him on that team as well for a long time. Still managed to find a major and multiple wins, big wins with that team. Nearly established an era with that team as well. Let's not get it twisted. That Stockholm win was one of the most dominant major victories of all time. And that team was on par and on course to win everything in the following year. So that alone to me is already huge signs for them in the long term. And then you pose the question to them, okay, well, what if we take away the stars from you? What if we take away every bit of the DNA that makes Navi, and we say, now work with lesser pieces, work with an IGL who's been cast aside by the community internationally, and say, win a major with this team. Now that to me is insane, right? Like I think you can look at any one of these players on this team, and you can say at some point in their career, they would have been cast aside by another roster. Ima looked completely distraught on this team for so long. I was calling for his head for a long time. You looked at JL; he's been very up and down in his career. Sure, he had those like upsides with Apex, but there were still a lot of question marks about him. Even the whole concept about Wonderful, it was like, oh, he's dunking in tier 2, can he do it in tier 1? Is that possible? After that Sprout stint? Again, just so many different question marks about this team, and it was always a question of, they don't have a true superstar, how do they win tournaments? And yet they defied all of those odds and were able to lift the trophy on a regular basis. And now again, Blade's knocking on a door of another era, and for me, there is definitely like, you can't knock it and say knock Sonic's achievements and say, he hasn't won 4 majors, right? 5 majors with Vitality, right? So I mean, it is kind of crazy, his accolades and what he was able to do. But to me, I just think that the vastly different stories with what Blade's been able to achieve, with potentially getting multiple eras on his hands, I feel like that is just more impressive in my own right. And I think he is my favorite coach. He is my GOAT coach, genuinely.
Yeah. I think the biggest argument of why Blade would be the GOAT is actually just the flip side of what's gone on with Zonic around when it's not been with Astralis, right? I think it's just because, that Falcons team is fucking dreadful. Like, they have been. It's not even like, it was a funny little meme at the start, but they are actually terrible, right? Like, don't play good Counter-Strike, are by no means a tier 1 team. I don't even think Simple coming in actually fixes the inherent issues in that team regardless. So we'll see. I mean, they've dropped, like, they're arguably their best player for Simple. So we'll see. But I think that's, for me, why the biggest argument. I wouldn't say I'm, like, full sold on Blade, but he's definitely, if I had to pick one of the two, I would 100% go Blade, especially just with this iteration of Navi and how well he's done. But I think the biggest reason for me is just because of what's gone on. Like, Zonic, he's meant to be this GOAT coach and understand the game better than anybody and this, that, and the other. But, he's got very decent pieces, especially when the core of that Falcons team were a number 1 team in the world, literally before they got picked up by Falcons. But in a different system and a different coach, they've completely fallen out of favor, right? They're just not a competent team. So that's, for me, the biggest argument why I think kind of Blade is the GOAT, especially these days, just because 2 different eras, very successful. That Falcons team is complete dog shit, so it's just like, that's the big thing for me.
Am I right in saying as well? Is this something that I've read somewhere and just like is a repressed memory? Am I right in saying that the Zonic Vitality Major win, like Xtaz still got a lot of credit for that because he was like working or helping them
Yeah.
behind the scenes? Is that right? Did
I do
think
remember seeing that.
so.
Yeah,
I think
he was
so.
doing a lot
That
of stuff
sounds
like
right.
analyst work, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he was like behind the scenes. Obviously, like I'm not going to take it away from Zonic because he was the one behind them. But like, obviously, there's some some conversations that maybe it was a bit of a dual um sort of partnership to help that major win. But yeah, I definitely do remember something like that. But still, I mean, Annie's right about Stockholm as well. It's that was ridiculously dominant. It was the only major I got a diamond coin in, which might say it all how dominant Navi were and how easy that
Yeah.
decision was. Um, but yeah, I've given my reasons. I think Annie's reasons are I think spot on as well. I do think he's the GOAT, and sometimes it doesn't have to be pure numbers that make you the GOAT. It's the deeper conversation of what you had to do, who you had to work with,
Yeah.
all these sort of different subjects. And for me, even though people will say Pimp's being a sensationalist, he's saying, oh, they just won an event, they're the best team in the world right now. Why is he saying it now? It seems pretty crazy to say. Like low key, if you look at it deeper, he's actually right, and that's why I think it was a good conversation to have.
Yeah, I want to go back and watch as well Yanko's points and just to kind of compare, just because like obviously he was very quick to be like, bro, like do you remember the? But I just don't think numbers are everything, right? Because if numbers were everything, then like Donk is the best player this year, but I don't think he is, right?
Dupree's the best player of all time.
Exactly, Dupree's the best player of all time. Exactly. So
yeah.
It's just one of those things. I don't think you can purely go off achievements. Like even I know it's like a way to dumb it down, but if you just think of like football, for example, there is some shit bench warmers on Man City that have got like fucking 4 Premier Leagues and whatever. so like it's like you can't. I just don't think you can go off that. It's like it's impact. It's what they're working with, the pieces, this, that, and the other. And I just think that's why for Blade, he's obviously done so well. And like, I think Annie kind of briefly touched on it, but 11 months ago now they picked up Sprouts up and they're like, hey, mate, win a major with this. You know what I mean? So it's just like it is crazy. Granted, we all knew Wonderful was absolutely unbelievable anyway. He definitely didn't deserve to be in tier 2, but yeah, still ridiculous what they've achieved. So big credit to them. Navi era is in full flow. We're all for it. Blade is the GOAT as well, and they're one of the few teams. I think it's one of 3. Is it? No, sorry. Blade's one of the 3 people with. Is he one of the ones with a slider? Yeah, he is. One of 3 people with a slider, right, on his achievements. Like, it's like him, Neo. One of 3 coaches. That is him, Neo, and Zonic are the 3. Because Neo has someone.
Oh yeah,
playing.
Carrigan. I was gonna say Carrigan has one, but he's not. He's still a player. So
yeah,
yeah,
he's one of 3 coaches who have a slider on their achievements. It's him for Zonic. And then Neo, obviously, most of which are playing, but then some of which are obviously as a team as well. So could be the GOAT. But yeah, we're all.
And if they win World Final, if they make finals of World Finals and if they win the major, dude, like we're up there in the conversation now. Like, how was these pieces? How has Immer improved so much out of absolutely nowhere? Like he's turned into one of Navi's most important players. We saw he obviously got the MVP for Rio. Like how he played in that Ancient on that comeback, some of the decisions he made. I think there was one round where he pushed a red room smoke and flanked 2 players donut on the perfect timing. Doing that in an arena can be so difficult. Like honestly, everything is gelled so well, and obviously Alexi and Blade deserve a whole lot of credit for that, and I'm happy for them because as Neo and Annie, right, like we've almost a kind of conversation I have like as a commentators and as people in the scene in the analyst space. You see these players come through and you can see the potential they have, but you never know if they're going to truly realize it or if they're going to, plummet and maybe make the wrong career decisions. We've seen JL Mad Lions back in the day. We've seen, of course, other teams, Immer Gamer Legion in early days of Gamer Legion.
Yeah.
And they've come to this point where they're playing together and they're winning the best events in the world and top 1 in the world. So you almost feel proud of them in a way, you know?
A year ago, or maybe like a year and a half ago, all of these players, bar bit, are tier 1.5 players. I think it's probably the way to put it. And now they are the number 1 team of the world, undoubtedly. So, absolutely fair enough. Let's move forward on to Elisa Masters Espoo, starting in 2 days' time. Well, the online portion starts in 2 days' time. Yeah, cool event. I'll be out there working it as well, so it's gonna be good fun.
Yeah.
I'll be with Anders commentating it in the arena with the desk of Thorin, Richard Lewis, Maui Snake, and then Banks as
Chills.
the stage host.
Chills.
Yeah, an absolutely insane desk. I very, very, very much can't wait to work it. I've obviously I know Banks quite well. I know Anders very, very well. I've met Maui once. Was it the major? I think Trav, we were together. I think for that. Was it?
Yeah, I think we met him at the
was
major.
it Cologne
Yeah.
maybe or something like that? Like we met him briefly.
I'm pretty sure we met him in Paris because he was working Paris.
That's Paris. Yeah. So we met him just briefly, said hello, that kind of vibe. Never worked with him, and then I've never met Richard or Thorin. So that'll be very, very fun. I'm very much looking forward to that. Of course, teams. Mongols coming to the #1 seed. Heroic 9Z Bait. NIP, Rebels, Ents, and Jano. Jano always making it. I remember last year they went from... I can't remember what it was, but it was
Havu, but...
it was Havu, yes,
honestly,
exactly, yeah. But Havu, they won 2 games, and they went from being, like, rank... What was it, like 176th to 19th? It was, like, one of the biggest,
something ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember it was, like, 150-something ranks, basically. It was, like, insane, just from one playoff run in... I mean, they
won't do that this time.
No,
mate. They've got a player that is like very known in Finland, in Juho, that just won't.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't been on a professional team. Even calling this as a professional team is a bit of a stretch. I feel like for like 2 years. You've got Ariel and X7 who are both announced retirements previously. Yeah. I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The only thing you really need to keep an eye on is really Henu because he's the one for the future.
What about Alu, man? He's still here.
Listen, he'll get the home event buff. It's fine. He'll go full Furia.
I'm actually looking forward to seeing what this team could do. My expectations are probably nothing, but there is like technically some beatable teams there. Like Rebels, I would say are beatable, right? You know, even in a way, you could definitely look at kind of Ents, 2 new players coming in of Natu and X Kaspersky, potentially beatable there. So who knows? I would definitely say like Bait on beatable. A Bait team look really, really good. I expect them to be great on LAN as well. They're just a fun team to watch. 9Z, you can talk about Rio a little bit, but I still think they're a very, very decent team in general. And then, of course, Heroic. I would probably say even Heroic do come in as the favourites in towards Elisa, just off the back of Rio, like how good they looked on LAN and in front of a crowd and whatnot. Where the Mongols occasionally do dip in front of a crowd to a degree, especially them being all quite young. I mean, me and Trav casted them at Rio when they got eliminated, and they gave up. Like they actually just simply gave up. Like it was, I can't remember. It was on Dust 2 what the score was
VP
at half time.
suffocated them.
Yeah, I can't remember what the score was at half time. I want to say like 9-3 maybe. But from about, I want to like, you know, probably like 8 rounds in or whatever, they were maybe losing like, I don't know, 5-3 or 6-2, something like that. They gave up. They fully gave up on Dust 2 on that third. They just, or the second round, whatever it was. They full sport every single round, didn't care about their economy, completely checked out, nobody played for each other. So that's never a good sign for me. Like, you know, even when Maru was calling pauses, they just ignored him. They didn't even listen. They weren't even conversing. So that was quite a worrying showing from the Mongols that they can just completely like tilt off the face of the earth, completely check out. So that's where like Heroic Spin maybe looks a little bit more. So who knows? And obviously NIP as well. I mean, this is a side that I still think you can't really check out. I do actually quite like that Mistem pickup. I do think he's pretty solid. I think he's been a good player in the academy side. And when he's had his moments on NIP, he's actually looked pretty solid. So I don't know. It's actually, well, it's maybe not like a super like tier 1 event in the sense of like we don't have, you know, the Navis or the Vitalities or the Mausers, etc. I still think there's some decent competition here where we should get a few decent storylines. It's like Bait trying to punch up as they have been all year, right? Doing really well climbing the ranks. So they should look really good. Ents trying to reclaim a bit of favor and potentially even like one of the few last chance hurrahs for Glaive, right? Like if this doesn't go well, Major / RMR doesn't go well, he's gone. Like it's as simple as that. They like he's got to go. Like it's being that bad. I mean, they're 52nd ranked team in the world right now. That's not a good spot for a team who's meant to be tier 1. And then it's like Heroic keeping up that form, NIP trying to get back in towards being a tier 1 contention team. So yeah, I do think there's some decent storylines here.
This is a pick me up event for pretty much every team that is at this event. In general, like
Bar Jano.
For NIP,
Bar Jano.
Yeah, Bar Jano, of course. Yeah, obviously. But yeah, for NIP, it's like I want Missim to succeed under all circumstances. This guy was such a stud in ATK, and I thought that him moving to EU was the right decision for him, considering how teams were just not giving him the proper chance in North America.
Yeah.
Which again, I've really got to question our organizations for not looking at this guy, because clearly he was made of sterner stuff. That he's now being given the duties to command NIP, which is really nice. And I think Ents have made good moves. If they can potentially make these players work, then good for them. I think they'll be in a good spot moving into the major. I think my most interesting what if is how does Bait perform in this event?
Yeah.
Because we've seen the kind of performances that they've done. All three of us have casted a lot of Bait in a lot of time, and we've seen what works. We've seen NPL play as well as he does. We've seen Hedrick put up some insane performances numbers wise, but the real question now is can they actually do it on LAN, and are they prepared to make that next jump? Because
Yeah.
we've seen a lot of different Bait iterations collapse at the RMR. We've seen a lot of different like these CIS teams that do really well online just bomb out of the RMR after being hyped up for pretty much an entire season.
Yeah,
So
Bay have the
it's good
worst
that they,
records ever when it comes to RMR like qualification matches. In like 3 separate
Mhm.
RMRs, whatever, they were like 2-0 up and then lose 3-2. Like I think they're like 0-9 in like major qual games. Like it's so bad their record. So
yeah,
this is
yeah.
spot on at that point basically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a great point to put in, because now the good thing for them is they actually do have a land leading up to it. It's
Mhm.
not like the Bates of old where they just get dropped into the deep end and they're just expected to beat these top teams, which in that situation they do, right? They do get those BO1 wins to at least get them to that point. And it's usually over some top teams.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think at this point, even if they can just make the playoffs, I think they'll be in a really good spot for the RMR, and they kind of get rid of the land jitters right now in Espoo, and then they move over to the RMR, and I think I actually kind of favor them if they can get there pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I love Bait. I mean, I think they're top of the CCT circuit. I know that doesn't mean much because it's online Counter Strike, really, like in many people's eyes, but they're top by a way. I think they're
Yeah.
top by like 300 points or something ridiculous. Like they've been so consistent over the course of the year. Um, the improvement of Essential, I think, is a really big positive
That is
for
true.
them.
Yeah.
He was really bad when he joined the team. I'm talking like
He was.
0.6 rating, nearly every
Yes.
map
He looked
bad.
clueless, man. He
He
looked
was
like
he
he
didn't
had just been
understand the
dropped into
system
the server.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, he
It
didn't
looked
understand
like
the
they
system
picked it up an
whatsoever.
MM and it was like one of our
Yeah.
teammates. You know what I mean? Like no offense
Seriously,
to
yeah.
him.
Random
No,
pick.
seriously, you're not far from the truth. I mean, he was really struggling, but he understands the system now. His first bullet aim is looking a lot more consistent. As I kind of made the joke a couple of times in broadcasts, and of course with both of you guys, I kind of coined him the Ukrainian Mzenio because it was kind of the
Yeah.
same roles, really tough roles, but also like really struggled in them to begin with, and then has kind of grown into them and learned it more as time has gone on. As a very young player, obviously, both very young. Um, I think the one sleeper choice on Bait, if you want to look at a player, is Alex. Like MPL as the leader is very, very good in terms of his numbers, and um, obviously maybe he's calling around himself a little bit, putting himself in decent positions. But Alex has been very, very rock solid as well. I think he deserves a shout for one of the more important players on this Bait team. Captain Kurtka can be your sort of rock. But I think if Essential hits his entries, MPL's there to take the next point of contact alongside Alex, and Hedrick's always there to sort of hold the angle as the AWPer, like third in or whatever. Like this team can be a bit dangerous. And as you say, for the sort of state of the tournament, they are in Group A, so they should have a freebie over Yano. Oh, you'd hope they'd have a freebie over Yano.
Imagine.
But I think every team should.
Yeah.
But if this new NIP on LAN could maybe do something. Obviously, if we do get a Bait versus NIP matchup, which I would say is probably relatively likely during this event. Obviously, that's Wrinkle versus his former team, which would be cool. That's going to be interesting because I think NIP could be one of those events where they suddenly show up as a new team with Mistum in the system with Spray, and they could cause some upset, especially if Mongols and Heroic have some minor hangover perhaps from Rio. But I would kind of agree with Nia. I think the most interesting things about this event are we going to get a Mongols Heroic final? Are Ents going to show anything with a brand new team? And can Bait do well? I think that's the main talking points for me.
On quote unquote home soil, I guess for Ents as well, like as an org. So I mean,
Poddy is at least.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in a weird way. Also, just for the org as a whole, right? Because in a weird way, like this
Yes.
is like, the worst case scenario for Ents, like just to really cement how bad things are going, is if they went to this event and didn't make playoffs, right? That would be terrible. Like if they came in and didn't get to play in the arena, like that would be really, really bad. This is, the whole crowd would be there for Ents, for the most part. I guess also technically a little bit for Saw, I would say, as well, right? Obviously being, from a Finnish man himself, right? So I guess technically he might have a little bit of like a kind of a core fan base in that sense, but for as a whole, they'll be there a lot for Ents, right? So I think if that goes wrong, it could be really, really damaging to the Zen side. I'm coming in with probably expectations that Heroic would be my favorite, is probably the team I'm going to look towards. But
Agreed.
yeah, I would love to see Bait. The thing with Bait that makes it really difficult is they've got to beat somebody big. They've got to knock out one of the Mongols or NIP. That's not easy from Group A, that's for sure. Whereas over on the other side, like Heroic, they should have no real issues against Rebels or Ents. Most likely 90. 90 can be quite a scary team, but for the most part, they should be fine. But yeah, Bait, if they want to make it to playoffs and they want to actually kind of prove themselves before heading into the RMR, as Annie was talking about, I do think they've got to scalp quite a big team here of the Mongols, who, they dipped out a little bit early in Rio, but are still always a very scary team, arguably one of the best teams Asia's ever produced. And then NIP, who actually on paper do look very, very good. And, from the glimpses we've seen of them with Missed Them as well, I've actually had something to show about them. So it's not going to be easy, but this is the thing. If Bait want to be revered as like a tier 1.5 team and want to potentially go in towards next year and get invites to the likes of, Star Ladder events and PGO and yada, 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 they have to beat these tier 1 teams. They have to say, we aren't just a tier 2 team who are grinding but they're not doing anything or not making it towards LAN, arguably like Zero Tenacity, right? Who, have been either not making it towards LAN, just about, those final stages dipping out, or not doing anything. This is the prime position for Bait to be like, we actually should be in this conversation, and we are, we're a top 30 team, but we need to be considered like a tier 1.5 team who should be going towards LAN. So should be good. I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I do think Rebels and Jano are probably coming towards this with pretty minimal expectations, I think is probably the way I'll put it. But who knows? I mean, Rebels have had their brief moments at times, right? But they've looked okay.
Flay's a bit of a gamer. I love Flay.
Exactly. They've had their moments here and there, and Sparrow's obviously been around for ages too as a coach. So you can't completely count them out, but it's definitely going to require something pretty insane. But
I just want to see something good for Ments as well, right? Because I think everyone in the scene is kind of bigged up Natsu a little bit. I think even Apex, obviously, as a fellow Frenchman, we all love him because he's come from Mouse NXT, right? Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, I think Kaspersky, ex-Kaspersky, has also had really good games for that. Of course, that Young Ninjas team. Yep. So there's some good choices there from Ents, and probably very smart choices in terms of them as an org, because they always seem to do really well in terms of, profits and stuff, at least in the past. Maybe not this year, but in the past, of course, when they've had successes, they always seem to make the right decisions with their roster and a very sustainable org, I guess you could call it that. Remains to be seen if that's going to be the case for this year, for sure. But yeah, I think they're good choices. But I think I always inherently trust in a team that has SDY on it. The previous iteration, I think, was always going to be a mess. This is the true test. I love SDY.
Yeah.
We need to see a little bit more from Poddy in big games. He's been quiet and not really a star that we want to see. But obviously they need to keep a flagship player on the team as a Finnish, someone to fly the Finnish flag for a Finnish organization, right? And Glaive, I am now kind of the opinion of Zonic in a way. Like we had the conversation with Blade earlier. I'm of the opinion that Glaive has, unfortunately, he's fallen off a cliff and this is his last shot.
Yes, I mean, this end of the year, right, is the big one. I think especially considering because, I guess worst case, but quote unquote, guys, best case scenario, they just let SDY call, right? He's like, sure, just get rid of Glaive and just pick up another decent rifler who could just play roles, right? And just SDY, you take up the mantle calling while it's here, because this has not worked out. I mean, it's one of those things that as a kind of an analyst and a commentator feels quite good, because when he got picked up, I was very much of the position. I think the tweet I said when they picked him up was, I think I was essentially just saying, like, I just think Glaive's washed, right? Because he was terrible at the tail end of tail end of Astralis. And
Then he had Kato, but that's the only thing he had.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
even that was like a massive like dream run, quote unquote. You know what I mean? So for me, it was always like I just don't like rate this guy at all. I think remember the tweet I said actually was like, I'm more excited that they picked up Cuban, who they obviously now don't have, but I was more excited that they picked up Cuban than they picked up Glaive. And now, especially in hindsight, I'm definitely thinking I would have kept Cuban over keeping Glaive in this team, because Glaive, he's just been garbage, right? It's just as simple as that. So yeah, this tail end of the year, we got this, and then no, they didn't have the RMR.
They didn't make the RMR.
Yeah, they didn't make the RMR. So
make
this
the
is
RMR,
actually this is actually the last chance. I completely forgot they didn't make the RMR. They completely bottled it. Yeah.
Literally, this is their only upcoming event.
Yeah,
genuinely.
I forgot they completely fucked it, didn't they? They're finishing like not dead last, but it was like second to last, right? Or whatever. It was
Did
like,
they go 1-3?
yeah, it was like
them
and like the fucking BC game lot and whatever, wasn't it? It was like in the same.
Let me check. Let me check.
Monty, I thought.
No, but like
Yeah,
they're in the same like group.
Yeah.
As BC
So they
game,
lost to
whatever.
Koi.
Right, yeah.
They lost to Koi. We know how bad Koi have been. They lost to
Yeah.
Unity.
Yeah.
Mikey the GOAT.
And Unity
We love
made it as well,
Mikey.
didn't they? They're like 3-1.
The only team they beat was Enterprise, and they lost to Monty 2-1. So
and
yeah.
Enterprise went 0-3. So yeah, I completely saw my. But yeah, this is actually last chance hurrah. If Glaive cannot make playoffs on, his org's home soil, they've got to can him. Like, it's got to be done. Like, yeah, man, that is actually wild. So what a disappointing turn for the side for
I
Ents.
like Ents as an org, so it makes me sad.
Yeah, I do, especially because they're like, the whole thing of like one of the only profitable orgs and this, that, and the other. But then there's like, there's, I'd rather than be a little bit less profitable and a little bit more successful. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, it's like you're very much contending.
Those go together.
Yeah, you're contending with Endpoint right now for like, it's like you boys are both profitable. You're both hot garbage. You know what I mean? You're both shit. Like, so it is weird. I guess final thing to really touch on is an event we're all working is none other than the Thunderpick World Championship 2024. We all got announced about a week ago, something like that. But roughly about a week ago. It was all announced. We're doing the online portion, so I'm first 3 days. Trav, you then come in. Is it day 2 you're on? Day 2, 3?
I am on the 22nd, 24th, 25th, and 26th.
Yes, you're day 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever, and then Annie, you are 4, 5, 6.
3 days of online.
Yeah. Of the 6 online, you're the 4th, 5th, 6th. So I'm opening 3, Paladin's closing 3, Trav's in the middle. So at some point. But yeah, should be a very, very cool event. One glaring thing that, of course, we're all looking towards is the debut of none other than Simple for Falcons. Can he save this team? My expectation is probably no. I don't think Sampaias was the issue. I don't think Simple's the...
He was improving lately.
Yeah, exactly. He's been their best player. I think, Simple... I think I like having Simple in it. I like seeing the GOAT back playing, but I don't think that was the issue for Falcons. I think Simple's the first step in fixing Falcons, but I think realistically, at this point, minus Snappy is definitely the main one I'm looking at, and potentially you can make arguments about minus Madden as well, especially since from Challenger Yonchipping, Madden was playing hero roles over Dupree. It's like Madden as your hero, Star Rifler is a little funky fresh, but should be a cool event. We've got a lot of top teams playing. In total, it's like, is it $850,000? I think something along those lines.
Right.
So the online stage is a prize pool of 80k because
the
80
LAN
grand
has
because
770.
5th to 8th, the 4 teams who finish 5th to 8th each get 20 grand for just qualifying over the course of the year, I suppose, right? For at least being involved as well. And then the main event, as you say, is I think 850, like you said. So let me just double check that. 770. So technically overall 850. You're right.
Yes.
Well,
okay.
first place gets 500k for the whole thing, which is pretty sick.
Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, which is very much going to help in those old Valve rankings. So that could be huge, especially considering technically none of the the top team here is VP at 9th, but they're like in a position where like they're not like I would say a really contending team at the moment. So this could be massive if they could pick up something for teams. But I think in particular this is massive for teams who are 1.5 teams. I'm looking at your Cloud9s, your Fanatics, your Bigs, right? If they were to win 500k, they shoot up the ranks like massively because it is actually quite congested in those Valve rankings around that sort of top 10. So that could be pretty spicy. But yeah, very, very cool. Very cool sort of teams here. There is still some to be announced. We have an inkling of a few of them. We won't ruin it. We won't spoil the surprise because it's not, it's not on us to say it. But we sort of know, not all, but some who are going to be joining the invited list. But of what teams are here so far, it's set out to be a very cool event, right? You got C9 who are still trying to prove themselves with this new kind of Russian speaking side, but it obviously has had its issues without a shadow of a doubt. Fnatic, of course, they've now brought in Nork in towards this team on a loan, but I really do like this loan as well. I feel like it's an opportunity for him to really do well this event, RMR, etc. For Big, obviously with them having Rig on in towards this team as well, he's had a couple of events with them, but they are starting to ramp up in offense. I'll give them credit. This is the first time in a long time that Big have actually felt competitive to me in like against decent teams. Like they were just so ass with Process. Like, not that I think he was initially like a massive issue, but it just didn't look like a competitive side. And then of course Simple Debut Falcons, M80 trying to really cement themselves as a top team, Heroic same for them, VP trying to become that notable scary team again. So I think there's a load of cool teams, a load of cool storylines heading in towards this event, and of course still a few to be announced as well.
And Unpaid's gonna be there, which I hope they
Get
do
the
well.
bread,
I
yeah.
genuinely hope as long as they're in this banner of Unpaid, I hope that they go as deep as possible and get as much prize
It'd be
money as they
hilarious
possibly can.
if they're the most successful the second they're not having to take
Yeah.
a cut to, because they're still owed prize money or whatever from the org, from as Kassad tweeted about. So it'd be funny if they basically earn as much as they can, kind of when they don't have to give anything to bleed.
Because they qualified with Cirque. They were the first EU qualifier, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken. So it's a
Yeah.
while ago. It really is a while ago now. But thankfully, of course, still have the core, so they keep their spot. And, funnily enough, obviously, you mentioned about Nork. Literally, first game they play in Res, which is also in a couple of days, of course. They play against Fnatic, who, of course, Nork's playing for now, which is kind of incredible.
Yeah.
And they could do the same at Thunderpick. We could have the same matchup. So, yeah, we don't. As we Neo touched on, we don't have the matchups yet. We don't have the full roster yet, but it's one of these tournaments which, as you say, we might see. It actually feels like it could be a bit of a taster for next year, because we're going to have some of the big events, which obviously some teams won't want to go to. They want to preserve their mental state and not burn out. So we might see a few more of these LANs where you will get the best team there being, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, right? That sort of group of 4. So it's going to be really interesting to see who actually comes out on top, especially as it's a mixed event too, with different regions coming in, as we said, with Legacy qualifying from North America, M80 qualifying from North America. You've got Imperial and Bestia from South America. So lots of interesting little factors here. And yeah, I think obviously all of us are praying to the seeding and Counter-Strike gods, if they exist, that we get Simple's first game, hopefully. But
one of us will get him.
One of us will get it.
It's the
One of us will get
guarantee,
Simple's
great.
game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I even if I don't get his first game, I even prepared like a little blurb that I want to read out when I start casting him, because it's like, as we were coming through during the 2020-2021 era, when he was like at the top, right? He was the daddy of the game at the time, alongside Zywoo. And it's like it's a dream for people like us to analyze him and cast him on broadcast. And for obviously it's a little bit of a different time now. People are questioning whether he's even got it in CS2. I think there's a chance that he might not. Like, I think at most he's a top 20 player, like right at the bottom of the top 20 next year. Most people probably think he won't even make the top 20. So it all depends on how Falcons look with him. But either way, it's exciting. He's got the legacy and the name value, and we all want to see him do well. I think it's good for the for the sport, good for the esport.
Have any of us worked, like, either cast or analyst a game in which Simple's been on?
In an event he's been in, yes, because I did the CIS RMR that he was in 2021.
Did you work at one of his games, though?
But I didn't do a Simple game.
Yeah, see,
I
I
never
haven't
have.
either. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I have. So this would be, it would actually be the first time. Better late than never. You know what I mean? It's like
Crazy.
like going to watch Messi at PSG. It's after the prime, but
we've had a chance at Zywoo. We had a chance at Donk because he came through the academy. Yeah. We've had a chance at JL because he came through Mad Lions and Apex. Like all the top players in the world, we've kind of been around there now. But Simple is more of the sort of OG, sort of back in the day, really came through with like Hellraisers and such, right, with Liquid. So yeah, it would be crazy.
I do think he's like the only player that I've not like ticked off. I'm pretty sure. I think he's the only.
I think I have 3 teams. For some reason, I've never been lucky enough to cast Liquid, or
Okay, I've done Liquid.
or FaZe, or Navi, because I've done Vitality a few times now. I think
Okay.
Navi, actually, I haven't done Navi yet.
Yeah,
as an org.
I got quite lucky.
So-
Liquid, I did the Americas RMR, and FaZe, I did the Blast EU RMR. So I tipped up. It is actually literally just. It is just now. I never done that iteration on RV. So yeah, just simple is the last one for me, and then I feel like I've completed the CS like bingo list of players. Yeah, but in towards this event, I guess sort of since we're all working it, we haven't really. I mean, I haven't done my prep for it yet because I'm still waiting to see who these final teams are. But of what has been announced, where are you guys leaning in terms of favorites for this event? Who do you think's coming in, or like who do you say sort of like maybe like top 3, top 4?
That's a tough question. I mean, the thing is, VP is still in such a weird position that I can't even guarantee them to move forward. I think they can genuinely beat or lose to anyone.
Yeah.
So I'm not that comfortable in saying them. I think Heroic has just made such a good foundation for me that I've just seen like what Tessus can do, what Shush can do, and we were joking about that, but I think there's a lot of truth behind it that I think they are very, very good players in their own rights. Tessus has been a great second star, and Shush has still been very, very stable in those anchor positions. And I think if you just give them enough time, you allow for Dexter to come back online, and Nerds is still shooting pretty well. So I think I'd probably put Heroic as that number 1 favorite that I look at. I think that Falcons can do it. It's interesting because I'm just gonna take the flyer here and I'm gonna buy into the nostalgia. I'm gonna say that they can make it all the way through. This is again just considering the teams that we have now. We have no idea how good the teams that are coming in are going to be because that could genuinely just change this entire conversation. But yeah, I think I'd put through Falcons. And honestly, I feel like one of these NA teams or these Americas teams are gonna sneak through. I don't know who it's gonna be. It could be Imperial. Hell, it could even be Legacy, even with their dip in form. But I hope it's M80 because I think that
Agree.
they have just such an exciting brand of Counter Strike. The fact that Sin looks as good as an IGL as he does right now is always awesome to watch. And of course, you gotta support Lake when you can. Sure. And I hope they have player cams, and I hope I can see him yelling his ass off after they win every round.
What are you leading, Trav? Top like 3 or 4 for you?
Obviously, this is the online stage. I'm just looking at the teams now who make it to that LAN. As kind of, I guess that's for me. I think if Falcons don't make the LAN, it'll be very disappointing. And considering there was a bit of promise in that Blast qualifier, there was something there. I'm sure it was with some players who's playing well. It could be completely different complexion with Simple, but I just think there's a little bit there that makes me think they'll make the LAN portion. I think Heroic will, just based off of Rio, maybe recency bias, but I think they actually, even online, they look pretty good lately because obviously they made it through that closed qualifier for Rio, that lower bracket, which was a genuinely impressive run. They beat Falcons to make it to Rio. And I agree with Annie. Like, I think seeing M80 online would be really, really cool. Mainly because I kind of like what you touched on, the fact that Slacks and Sin replaying a home event in Berlin. I think that would be... True. That is, I think, the main thing for me that I'd really want to see. VP, I can take or leave. Don't get me wrong. I think even though we worked the Rio games, two of the Rio games they did, or one of the Rio games they did, Neo against the Mongols, and they actually looked like kind of the VP of old. It was Mongols was kind of running out of steam.
Yeah.
So I'm not really inspired by them whatsoever still, even though there was a bit of OG Jame to see there. If I was to pick a bit more of a left field one, I think that Cloud9, genuinely, they've been working so hard away from officials. They lost to Passion UA. It's not a bad loss. Passion UA are amazing.
Yeah.
And in an amazing current form. They are only have this to focus on alongside the RMR. They literally, this is hugely important practice against decent opposition at this level for the RMR. It's the only 2 things they've had to focus on. I really do think they're going to come in with something, and they could be the underdog pick to make the LAN portion. I'm not saying they will, but I'll pick them as the underdog pick to make the LAN portion. And I think if I was to make a genuine pick, Big Online have looked terrible, so I'm actually not going to pick them, even though it would be the home event too. Obviously, maybe one of the invited teams could make it, but I think I will just stick with the 4 that make it. In my eyes, Heroic, Falcons, M80, and I'll actually just go with Cloud9 because the other teams haven't been announced yet.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
fair
can't
enough.
say anything.
Yeah, I think for me, if I had to go like semi in order, I would say Heroic are probably the first sort of shoe in. I would probably say. I then look towards M80 and say M80 are probably like my second team of like who, if they play to level. You know, they definitely had their issues in Atlanta, that's for sure. Like, I think they, you know, losing to Wildcard was bad, right? You know, that was not what we wanted to see from them. I don't know what went on there, but, you know, let's just kind of, if I'm going to cherry pick results a little bit and just say ignoring that, I still think they've got a bit to show about them, and I do actually like this team quite a bit. My sleeper team, you know, you've gone for Cloud9. My sleeper team, though, I'm actually going to go for is actually Fnatic. I actually do want to keep an eye on this Fnatic side because I do think just minus Afro plus Nork, I do just think it's such a direct upgrade. Blame still brings a lot of firepower towards his team. Crims is still just so reliable time and time again. Matties has his pop-off moments as well. And I think Bodies does a good job to kind of bring this team together. So for me, I actually do want to keep an eye on this Fnatic side. I just think sometimes they punch up a little bit. And I think this is a decent event where they could, especially for like Nork as well, wants to kind of prove what he's got and on all the rest. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Fnatic can bring. Falcons, they should make it. I think, you know, the big thing is they've not really had anything else that they need to focus on. They're not being kind of weighed down with too many officials. They can actually have time to implement Simple in towards the system and prac with him and this, that, and the other. So hopefully we get to see it, but I am a little bit worried.
They should be able to play with Kato as well. Like they should have a LAN room to play during Kato.
Exactly. So I'm a little worried for them, that's for sure. But we shall see. We shall see. But all in all, I do think as well some of these invite teams might have a bit of an upper hand as well. So I have to wait and see when they come out. But should be a good event. We're looking forward to working it. It starts, of course, not too long actually. Literally just straight after Elisa. Yeah, so I'll be flying back from Elisa and then going straight on to day one of Thunderpick. So similar vibes with Atlanta into Rio. I'm doing the Elisa on the plane at like 10 a.m. I think it is, something like that. And then, yeah, doing the evening shift for that one. So I do get a bit of a break in between. It should be okay. But yeah, fellas, that basically is all we sort of wanted to touch on. I guess we can finish off, as we always do, with what we've got coming up. What's the next sort of month or so looking like? I think we'll probably end up doing another one of these. And the next time I'll have free time is probably pre-RMR, if I had to make an assumption.
Yeah, RMR Preds will be fun.
So yeah, that'll be the last, the next time we do one of these. So how are we feeling? What we got coming up? Yeah, what's the schedule looking like?
Yeah, I guess
Anna, you first.
Thunderpick is coming along, which will be exciting. Yeah, it's been a bit since I've uploaded content, but with school kind of slowing down in November, I will probably start uploading. I've said this I think every episode, and I've just not done it. But
Yeah.
I actually have ideas that I'm confident in now, and I'm getting a lot of motivation from seeing other guys in our region do some good stuff. Shout out Fi.
Shout out Fi one time. He is absolutely smashing it, dude.
Yeah,
getting like 50k views in 12 hours on like every video. He's nailing it.
Well, we got some friendly competition to try and emulate that kind of success. So
it's inspiring me to do like actual uploads.
Exactly. So hopefully I can follow that up with actual content in November.
Yeah. Trav?
Same here. I was not FI level, I can guarantee you that, but I did a RMR closed qualifier prediction video and kind of like a who to watch kind of thing, because there was a lot of names probably people who are paying attention to the scene won't have known of. Like I think Mikey on Unity was a really good example as how he's come through the scene very, very quickly recently. Probably do another one pre-RMR just to post my predictions and give my thoughts on the teams that made it. And when it comes to work coming up, tomorrow I've got ECL South America. I've actually got 3 BO3s and then the best of 5 final for ESL Challenger League South America.
Nice.
Which is nice. First time I've ever been on a BO5 final, I think, for one of the ECL seasons. It's been many years, so I've been very grateful to have that opportunity. I've got 1 day of Compass, and then as we both, of course, have mentioned, we're straight into Thunderpick. I think got a tiny bit of Hellcase Cup work, but maybe I think 4 days of that. So always fun, keeping my fingers on the pulse in the scene. Very enjoyable. And yeah, looking forward to it all because it's all events that I've enjoyed working in the past. Neo,
Yeah.
Finland. Neo, what are you going to learn in Finland? What food are you going to try? Is it first time you're in Finland, or was it second?
First time, yeah. I know one I'm going to be avoiding, which is the that rotting fish thing. Have you,
Yeah, I've heard
seen
it, yeah.
this? Yeah. Dude, like people like open it and like they one whiff and they're like throwing up. So gonna avoid that. I think apparently I'm not 100% sure what's gonna happen because I don't know what the turnaround is, but there might be maybe all of us doing a bit of a content piece or eating some Finnish food. I don't actually even know what Finnish food. Let me even Google it. What is Finnish food? Like I can't even name like a Finnish food. Finnish cuisine. Salmon soup. Sounds pretty good, to be fair. Carolean, a traditional pastry with rice and barley. All right, cool.
Sounds
Cinnamon
good.
buns, often eaten with coffee. Korva
Cinnamon buns, ayo.
Korva pusti.
Ayo.
Hey, man, I'll slam one of them. So yeah, like some stuff like that. I don't know, yeah, because so we're in Espoo, but it's actually basically like 15 minutes away from Helsinki. It's basically Helsinki, essentially. It's just like a kind of a
Sub-city.
It's like a small, small city, but it's so close on the metro. So hopefully I get a bit of a chance to go into Helsinki. I don't think it's actually going to be that cold. Apparently last year it was like, snowy, -2 degrees or whatever. This year, I think it's going to be like 10-ish degrees and whatnot. So it's not going to be like that bad. But it should be good. It should be a really fun event. They did say, they asked, do you want to do a meet and greet with your fans? And I was like, mate, I think you grossly overestimate my level of attendance to that. I might have one dude.
Maybe
in
the others.
Yeah.
Wink,
Exactly.
wink.
Maybe Thor and Richard, Banks, they might have a fair decent line with them. I'll get in the line, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I'm not going to be I'll start queuing with them. But, yeah, so, but it should be fun. I think we're going to get a chance to, like, really, like, hang out in the arena and see what stuff is like. I mean, obviously, because there's not many events in Finland, every year they do actually show up. It gets pretty full, so that should be pretty fun. Got Finland, straight into Thunderpick. I think I might have some Hellcase stuff as well. I really don't even know. And then there's one unannounced event which I can't mention just yet, but it will be coming up soon-ish. And then it does, like Ali kind of mentioned, it just sort of tail off into November. It's just RMR time basically, and it's going to be considerably slower. So I'm hoping as well that I'm gonna do a little bit more content. I've got a notes, like on my notes app, I've got like I must be like 50 different video ideas, and like some of them I've even done like scripts for, and it's just like, do I sit down and record this? Nah, like I can't see it. So yeah, that I also will be soonish uploading. I've got them edited now, but a bunch of the vlogs that I did. So one from Mongolia should be coming soon. Vietnam should be coming relatively soonish, and then there's one more. I can't remember which one it was. Somewhere I went, but again, should be coming relatively. So from one of the lands I did, should be coming relatively soonish. So I've got 3 in total, like vlogs of like me going to random events, just like fucking around and shit. So that should be semi soonish. But yeah, that's basically it really. We'll be back, like you said, early November time, pre RMR. We'll do basically a whole RMR episode going through every region, go through the games. Especially when the matchups are probably out, we can start doing like the tier list. I think they're always kind of a good way to go about it, and all that jazz. But that is basically us done for this month's iteration. I don't even know what episode we're on at the moment, but we've been this has now been going like a year and a half at this point or something like that. So that we've done better than most podcasts. My podcast do like 3 episodes and then can it. So I do think we're one of the very. It's not consistent. We don't have a schedule, but it consistently isn't like it's not dead.
It exists.
It exists.
It
Doesn't die. We still get episodes out.
We exist, guys.
Exactly. Where I know plenty of podcasts that do about 6 episodes and then just can it and never come back. So we've made it past that threshold. I think we're on like 15 at least at this point. So at the very least, fair play to us. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always. Make sure to go and check out the guys. Links are below.
And it's Paladin CS2, not that Paladin.
Exactly. His Twitter will be below. We can't change that. graphics guy, bye. You know what I mean?
We
It's
don't,
like,
we
what
don't
can
have
do?
the technology.
We do not have the technology to do this. I tried my best. Photoshop is not abiding. I have no clue what to do with Photoshop. So we can't change it. I don't make the graphics. So that is that. It is Paladin CS2. But the links will be below. Go and check out the fellas. If you're watching on YouTube, go and check out the Twitch. If you're watching it on Twitch, go check out the YouTube. The links are in the bottom left. Nice and easy. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Take care.